The stars screamed past the viewport as Marcus Kane fought with the controls of his dying cargo ship. Sparks flew from shattered panels while warning alarms blared their mechanical death song. The blue-green world of Kepler 44 to be rushed up to meet him like an angry ocean. "Come on, you piece of junk," he muttered through gritted teeth, pulling hard on the flight stick. The ship groaned and shuddered, its hull heating to dangerous levels as it tore through the planet's atmosphere. Trees and mountains blurred below as Marcus searched desperately for somewhere safe to land. The crash came like thunder. Metal screamed against rock as the ship carved a burning scar across a crystal field. Marcus's world went black as his head slammed into the console. When consciousness returned, silence had replaced the chaos. Marcus tasted blood and felt a sharp pain in his ribs. His cargo ship lay broken around him like the bones of some giant beast. Through a crack in the hull, alien sunlight painted everything in shades of purple and gold. He crawled through the wreckage, gathering what supplies he could find. His emergency beacon was smashed, his communications dead. The nearest human outpost was 3 star systems away. Marcus Kane was alone on an unknown world with no way home. The crystal formations outside caught his attention first. They grew from the ground like frozen lightning, some tall as buildings, others small as flowers. Their surfaces threw rainbows in all directions, creating a landscape that looked like a dream. But it was the sound that made him freeze. Crying, soft and distant, but unmistakably the sound of children in distress. Marcus followed the sound through the crystal maze, his hand resting on the plasma pistol at his hip. On frontier worlds, anything could be dangerous. But as he rounded a tall formation, what he saw made him lower his weapon. 4 small figures huddled together in a natural cave formed by curved crystals. They were clearly not human, but their youth was obvious. The largest might have been 10 years old by human standards. Their skin had a pale blue tint that shimmered like moonlight on water, and their large eyes glowed softly in the dim cave. "Please do not hurt," the oldest whispered in accented but clear human speech. "We mean no harm." Before Marcus could respond, another voice spoke from deeper in the cave. A figure emerged from the shadows, moving with the fluid grace of a trained warrior. She was clearly of the same species as the children, but adult and fierce. Her hand rested on what looked like an energy weapon. "Stay back, human," she said, her voice like music played on steel strings. "These children are under my protection." Marcus raised his hands slowly, showing he meant no threat. "I'm not here to hurt anyone. My name is Marcus Kane. I just crashed nearby." The woman studied him with eyes that seemed to see through to his soul. She was beautiful in an alien way that took his breath away. Her features were sharp and elegant, her long hair the color of starlight. When she moved, it was with the controlled power of a dancer or a deadly fighter. "I am Nira of the Villani," she said finally, lowering her weapon slightly. "These are Zeph, Kira, Finn, and Luna. We are refugees. Refugees from what?" Marcus asked gently, crouching down to seem less threatening. Nira's expression hardened. "From those who would use children for their gifts. The galaxy has placed a price on their heads that would make warlords weep with joy. 5 million credits each." Marcus felt his blood run cold. 20 million for 4 kids? What makes them so valuable? "Show him," Nira said softly to the children. The youngest, Luna, stepped forward. She was no bigger than a human 6-year-old, with the same glowing eyes as the others. She held out her tiny hand toward a small crystal on the cave floor. Without touching it, the crystal began to glow brighter and brighter until it lit up the entire cave like a star. "Psychic abilities." Marcus breathed. "They're telepaths." "More than that," Nira said. "They can move objects with their minds, share thoughts across vast distances, and when they work together, they can do things that would reshape worlds. In the wrong hands, they could be weapons. In the right hands, they could bring peace to the galaxy." Marcus looked at the 4 frightened faces watching him. He thought of his own sister's children back on Earth, how they looked when they were scared. The same expression of trust mixed with fear that hoped desperately that the adults around them would keep them safe. "The years are close," Nira continued. They have been tracking us for months. My ship was damaged in our last escape. We have been hiding here, but they will find us soon." "How soon?" Marcus asked. As if in answer to his question, a distant roar echoed across the crystal field. Something large and mechanical was approaching fast. Nira's weapon was back in her hands instantly, her body tense and ready for battle now. She whispered. Marcus made his decision in that moment. He had crash-landed on this world by accident, but maybe that accident was really fate. He looked at Nira, at her fierce determination to protect these children, even against impossible odds, and felt something stir in his chest that he had not felt in years. "My ship is wrecked. But the emergency pods might still work," he said quickly. "We can use them to get off this rock." "Why would you help us?" Nira asked, suspicion and hope warring in her voice. Marcus stood up, checking his weapon's charge level. "Because someone has to. And because running from bullies has never been my style." The roar grew louder, joined by others. Whatever was hunting them was bringing friends. The crystal forest exploded into deadly beauty as laser bolts shattered formations all around them. Marcus grabbed Luna, the smallest child, while Nira swept up Finn. Zeph and Kira ran between them as they fled deeper into the maze of gleaming spires. "This way," Marcus shouted over the sound of pursuing engines. His emergency pod was hidden in a grove of smaller crystals, camouflaged by the ship's emergency protocols. But they had to reach it first. Behind them, dark shapes moved through the crystal formations. The hunters wore armor that absorbed light, making them hard to track. Their leader's voice boomed across the field, through amplified speakers. "Surrender the children, human, and we will make your death quick. Continue to interfere, and we will take our time with you." Marcus felt Luna tremble in his arms. "Don't listen to him, little star," he whispered, using a pet name that came naturally. "We're getting out of here." Nira moved beside him like liquid shadow, her weapon firing precise shots that sent their pursuers diving for cover. She was magnificent in combat, every movement perfect and deadly. Despite the danger, Marcus found himself stealing glances at her fierce grace. "The pod is just ahead," he called to her. They burst into the clearing where his emergency pod sat hidden among finger-like crystal growths. It was designed for one person, but they would have to make it work. As Marcus activated the systems, Nira took position at the clearing's edge, providing cover fire. "How many are there?" Marcus asked as he helped the children into the cramped pod. "At least a dozen," Nira replied, her voice steady despite the odds. "Led by Voss the Render. He is known across 3 sectors for his cruelty." A new barrage of fire forced her to duck. One blast came close enough that Marcus could feel its heat. Without thinking, he stepped in front of Nira, returning fire with his plasma pistol. "Get in the pod," he ordered. "I can handle myself." "Human," she said, but there was warmth in her voice now. Not just suspicion. "I know you can. But we do this together, or not at all." Their eyes met for a moment across the chaos. Something passed between them, a connection that had nothing to do with words. Nira nodded and moved toward the pod, firing as she retreated. The emergency pod launched like a meteor, its small engines screaming as they lifted away from the crystal field. Through the rear viewport, Marcus could see dark shapes firing uselessly at their climbing craft. But his satisfaction was short-lived. Warning lights began flashing on the control panel. "Fuel leak," he announced grimly. "We have maybe 20 minutes of flight time." Nira moved beside him at the controls, her nervousness making his heart race despite their desperate situation. She smelled like mountain air and something floral he could not identify. When her hand brushed his while reaching for a switch, electricity seemed to arc between them. "There," she said, pointing to a mountain range on the horizon. "Those peaks hide cave systems. We can lose them there." They flew low across an alien landscape of purple grass and silver trees. The children huddled together in the pod's rear section, their large eyes wide with fear and excitement. Despite everything, they seemed to trust their protectors completely. "Why did you really save us?" Nira asked quietly as they approached the mountains. Marcus was quiet for a moment, focusing on piloting through the rocky peaks. I had a family once, he said finally. A wife and daughter. Pirates attacked the colony where they lived while I was away on a cargo run. By the time I got back, he shook his head. I swore I would never stand by and watch innocents suffer again. Nira's hand found his on the control stick. Her touch was warm and gentle. I am sorry for your loss. What about you? Why risk everything for 4 children who are not even your own species? They are my species, Nira said softly. The Villani were dying out when these children were born. They represent hope for our entire race. But more than that, they are innocent. They deserve to choose their own path, not be sold to the highest bidder. The pod set down in a hidden canyon as its fuel ran out completely. Ancient caves pocked the canyon walls like dark eyes. Marcus helped the children out while Nira scouted their surroundings. We should be safe here for tonight, she reported. But they will track us. They always do. As darkness fell, they made camp in a deep cave lit by small glowing fungi. The children fell asleep quickly, exhausted by their flight. Marcus sat watch at the cave mouth while Nira checked their remaining supplies. Marcus, she said his name like she was testing how it sounded. Thank you. For everything. She sat beside him, close enough that he could feel her warmth and the cave's chill. The alien stars above them cast her face in silver light, making her even more beautiful. We are not safe yet, he reminded her. No, she agreed. But for the first time in months, I have hope. When she looked at him, Marcus saw something new in her eyes. The suspicion was gone, replaced by something deeper, without thinking. He reached up and brushed a strand of starlight hair from her face. Nira, he whispered. She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing for a moment. When they opened again, last barriers between them had fallen away. I know this is not the time or place, she said softly. Nothing about this situation makes sense, Marcus replied. But this feels right. Their kiss was gentle at first, tentative like the first touch of dawn, then deeper, carrying all the fear and hope and desperate connection they had found in each other. When they finally parted, both were breathing hard. Whatever happens tomorrow, Nira whispered against his lips. I am glad we found each other. In the distance, the howl of hunting engines echoed off the canyon walls. Their pursuers were getting closer. The underground city of refuge sprawled through natural caverns like a hidden jewel. Bioluminescent plants provided soft blue-green light, while water trickled through carefully carved channels. Beings from a dozen different species moved through the tunnels. All united by one thing. They were all running from something. Marcus marveled at the engineering as their guide. A 4-armed creature named Vec led them deeper into the complex. Beside him, Nira kept the children close, her warrior's instincts still alert, despite finding apparent safety. You will be safe here, Dec assured them in his musical voice. Refuge has hidden refugees for over a century. The hunters have never found us. Their quarters were simple, but comfortable. Connected caves with sleeping alcoves carved into the rock walls. After days of running and hiding, it felt like luxury. The children immediately claimed the largest cave as their own, their laughter echoing off stone walls for the first time since Marcus had met them. They sound like normal kids when they are not terrified, he observed to Nira. She smiled, and the expression transformed her face completely. They are normal children. That is what makes this whole situation so wrong. That evening, the rebel leaders gathered to hear their story. Marcus found himself facing beings he had only heard about in spacer tales. Catharian mind-readers with their crystal-studded skulls, hulking Gorvan warriors with their stone-like skin, even a few humans who had fled the corporate worlds. The children's abilities, asked Dr. Varric. A elderly Catharian, with knowing eyes. How strong are they really? Nira looked at Marcus before answering. They had grown comfortable reading each other's expressions, communicating without words. He nodded slightly. Show them, little ones, Nira said gently. Jay, Kira, Finn, and Luna joined hands in the center of the cave. Their eyes began to glow brighter as they concentrated. Suddenly, every piece of loose stone in the chamber rose into the air, spinning in complex patterns like a three-dimensional dance. The rebels gasped as the stones formed shapes. Animals, ships, even recognizable faces of people in the crowd. But that was not the most impressive part. As the demonstration continued, Marcus felt something touch his mind. Not invasive or threatening, but gentle, like a whisper of wind. Suddenly, he could sense what everyone in the cave was feeling. Wonder, fear, hope, determination. The children were sharing their empathic abilities with the entire group when they released their connection. The stones settled gently to the ground. The 4 children swayed with exhaustion. But they were smiling. By the ancient gods, breathed Varric, they are not just psychic. They are a gestalt entity when joined. They could reshape entire worlds, or destroy them, added Commander Jackson, a grizzled human who ran Refuge's defenses. No wonder every government and corporation in the galaxy wants them. Later, as the others dispersed to plan their next move, Marcus walked with Nira through the city's garden caverns. Phosphorescent flowers bloomed in impossible colors, while tiny creatures that looked like living jewels flitted between the leaves. This place is lit. Incredible, Marcus said. It reminds me of home. Nira replied wistfully. My world had gardens that floated in the air. It's held up by the same psychic forces that run through these children. Tell me about your world. Your real story. Nira was quiet for a long moment, watching the jewel creatures dance among the flowers. I was not just a guard, she said finally. I was the royal protector of the Villani court. The children were placed in my care when their abilities first manifested. Marcus stopped walking. You are royalty? Was royalty. When I chose to flee with the children, instead of surrendering them to the Galactic Council, I was stripped of rank and declared a traitor. My own people hunt me now, just as surely as Voss and his mercenaries. The weight of her sacrifice hit Marcus like a physical blow. She had given up everything: title, home, family, entire world for 4 children who were not even related to her. Why? He asked softly. Because power without conscience is just another form of slavery. The Council wanted to use the children as living weapons to enforce their will across the galaxy. I could not allow that. They had reached a quiet alcove where a small waterfall created a natural shower of silver droplets. The sound of falling water was soothing after days of engine noise and weapons fire. Nira sat on a smooth stone bench, looking older than her years. Marcus sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. You gave up your kingdom for them. I gave up a kingdom of lies for a chance at truth, she corrected him. These children represent the future of my species, Marcus. Not as weapons, but as bridges between worlds. They can share emotions, understanding, empathy, across any barrier. In a galaxy torn by war and mistrust, they could be the key to real peace. And you believe that enough to sacrifice everything? I believed it enough to try. But I was only one person against the entire Galactic Council, until... She turned to look at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Until a human cargo pilot crashed on a crystal world and chose to help strangers. For no reason except that it was right. Marcus reached up and touched her face, wiping away a tear that had escaped. I did not do it for nothing. I did it for you, for them, for the chance that maybe, just maybe, the good guys can win one for once. Marcus, she whispered, leaning into his touch. This time when they kissed, there was no urgency born of danger, no desperation of the hunted. This was the kiss of 2 people who had found something precious in each other, something worth fighting for beyond mere survival. When they broke apart, Nira rested her forehead against his. I love you, she said simply, as if the words had been waiting inside her all along. I love you too, Marcus replied, and meant it more than any words he had ever spoken. They held each other as the waterfall sang its ancient song. 2 refugees from different worlds who had found home in each other's arms, but their peace was shattered by the sound of warning klaxons echoing through the caverns. Deck's voice boomed over the intercom system. All residents to emergency positions. The hunters have found us. Refuge is under attack. The sound of distant explosions rumbled through the stone walls. Their sanctuary had become a trap. The volcanic moon of Period 7 had no atmosphere, no water, and no mercy. Molten lava flows painted the dark landscape in hellish reds and oranges, while geysers of superheated gas erupted from cracks. It was the last place anyone would choose to make a stand, which made it perfect for a last stand. Marcus crouched behind a ridge of cooling lava rock, checking his weapons charge for the 10th time. The plasma rifle he had taken from Refuge's armory was military grade, but it would not last long against the small army pursuing them. Beside him, Nira adjusted the settings on her energy bow, her movements calm and precise, despite the impossible odds. "How many?" Marcus asked, though he dreaded the answer. 15, maybe 20 ships, Nira replied, scanning the black sky with her enhanced vision. Voss brought everything he had. The children huddled in a natural shelter formed by cooled lava tubes. They had been through so much, but they were still just kids. Luna, the youngest, clutched a small crystal she had picked up on their first meeting, using its glow to comfort herself. The others stayed close to her, their psychic bond evident in the way they moved and breathed in perfect synchronization. "We cannot run anymore," Zeph said, the oldest of the four. His voice cracked with the effort of trying to sound brave. "There is nowhere left to go." Marcus felt his heart break a little. The boy was right. They had fled from world to world, system to system, always one step ahead of the hunters. But Voss had been patient, driving them toward this barren moon like a predator herding prey into a kill zone. "Maybe we do not have to run," Kira said quietly. She was the most thoughtful of the children, always listening, always thinking. "Maybe it is time to show them what we really can do." "No," Nira said firmly. "Using your full power together is too dangerous. You could hurt yourselves, or worse." "What if we do not?" Finn asked. He was the fighter of the group, always ready to protect his family. "What if we just let them take us? How many others will suffer if they get what they want?" Marcus looked at these four remarkable children and saw something that made his chest tighten with pride and fear. They were not just running anymore. They were choosing to fight not for themselves, but for others they would never meet. "There has to be another way," he said. The rumble of approaching ships cut off any further discussion. Dark shapes descended from the star-filled sky like mechanical vultures. Voss's flagship, a massive cruiser bristling with weapons, led the formation. The hunter's amplified voice echoed across the volcanic wasteland. "Marcus Kane, Nira of Villani. Your little adventure ends here. Surrender the children, and I will kill you quickly. Force me to take them, and you will wish you had died in that crystal forest." Marcus stood up, making himself visible on the ridge. "Go to hell, Voss." Laser fire immediately erupted from the ships, turning the air around him into a light show of deadly energy. Marcus dove for cover as molten rock exploded where he had been standing. The battle had begun. Nira moved like flowing water across the broken terrain, her energy bow singing as it sent bolt after bolt into the attacking ships. Her shots were impossibly accurate, finding weak points in armor and shields. But there were too many targets, and their ammunition would not last forever. "Marcus." She called out during a brief lull in the firing. "I need to tell you something, in case we do not know," he interrupted, firing a burst that sent one of Voss's fighters spiraling into a lava flow. "We are getting out of this. All of us." But even as he said it, Marcus knew they were losing. More ships kept arriving, surrounding their position. Soon they would be completely cut off, with nowhere to run and no way to fight back effectively. That was when Luna made her choice, the youngest of the four. Children stepped out of their shelter, her small crystal glowing brighter than Marcus had ever seen it. The other children immediately joined her, forming their familiar circle. "Little star, get back to cover," Marcus shouted. But Luna just smiled at him with a peace beyond her years. "It is time, Marcus," she said in her sweet voice. "Time to show them what love can do." The four children joined hands. Their eyes blazed with silver fire as they reached out with their combined consciousness. But instead of lashing out at their attackers, they did something Marcus had never imagined. They shared their memories, every ship in Voss's fleet. Every hunter with a weapon trained on the volcanic ridge suddenly experienced what the children had experienced. They felt the terror of being hunted, the loneliness of being always afraid, the desperate hope of finding someone who would protect them without asking for anything in return. But they also felt the love, Marcus's fierce determination to keep them safe, Nira's willing sacrifice of everything she had ever known, the way the rebels at Refuge had opened their hearts and homes to strangers, the way for frightened children had found the courage to choose hope over despair. The firing stopped. In the sudden silence, Marcus could hear his own heartbeat echoing off the volcanic rocks. Around them, the hunter ships hung motionless in the thin atmosphere. Voss's voice came again, but now it was uncertain, shaken. What? What did you do to my men? Zeph answered, his young voice carrying clearly across the wasteland. We showed them who we really are, and who you really are. One by one, the hunter ships began to pull back. Some turned and fled into hyperspace immediately. Others lingered, their crews struggling with emotions they had forgotten they possessed. But Voss was not finished. His flagship descended toward the ridge, weapons charging for a final attack. Clever trick, children, but I am too old and too dead inside for your empathy games. You are still worth 20 million credits. I intend to collect. The massive ship's main guns locked onto the children's position. Marcus knew there was no way their small shelter could withstand that much firepower. He looked at Nira, seeing his own resignation reflected in her eyes. Then something impossible happened. The other hunters, the ones who had not fled, turned their weapons on Voss's ship. The mercenaries who had been chasing them for months across the galaxy suddenly opened fire on their own leader. What are you doing? Voss screamed over the communication channels. Stand down. That is an order. New orders, came a gruff voice that Marcus recognized as one of Voss's lieutenants. We quit. The brief but vicious battle lit up the volcanic moon's sky like a fireworks display. When the light faded, Voss's flagship was a drifting wreck, its engines dead and its weapons offline. Marcus and Nira stared in, amazement as the remaining ships landed around their position. Armored figures approached with their weapons lowered, their helmets retracting to show faces that were different but united by the same expression of wonder. The children? Said the lieutenant who had spoken before, scarred woman with kind eyes. They are not weapons at all, are they? They are healers. They heal hearts. Luna stepped forward, no longer afraid, and took the woman's large, calloused hand in her tiny one. Everyone can be healed, she said simply. Everyone can choose love. Marcus pulled Nira into his arms, hardly daring to believe it was over. She kissed him fiercely, pouring all her relief and joy and love into the contact. We did it, she whispered against his lips. We actually did it. Around them, former enemies were becoming friends, united by the children's gift of empathy and understanding. The hunters who had terrorized them were now their protectors, ready to spread the word about what they had experienced. For the first time in months, the four children were truly safe. And Marcus and Nira had found something worth more than safety. They had found each other. 2 years later, the ceremony took place on New Eden, a colony world where 3 different species had learned to live in harmony. The venue was a garden that floated among the clouds, held aloft by the same psychic forces that the children had helped the colonists understand and harness. Marcus adjusted his formal jacket, nervously as he watched the gathered crowd. Humans, Vellani, Catharians, and dozens of other species mingled freely, all united by their shared experience of the children's gift. It was the first truly integrated community in the galaxy, and it existed because 4 young refugees had chosen love over fear. You look nervous, Nira observed, approaching him through the crowd. She was radiant in a gown that seemed to be woven from starlight itself, traditional Vellani wedding dress that had been her grandmother's. I am terrified, Marcus admitted with a grin. I have faced down pirates, bounty hunters, and galactic conspiracies. But standing up there in front of everyone and promising to love you forever, that is the scariest thing I have ever done. Only because it is the most important, Nira said, reaching up to straighten his collar. And you have been promising to love me forever, every day for 2 years. This just makes it official. The children ran up to them, practically bouncing with excitement. They had grown in the past 2 years, not just physically, but in confidence and joy. They were still connected by their psychic bond, but now they were also connected by the family they had chosen. "Marcus, Nira, it is time," Luna announced. Still clutching her lucky crystal, but no longer needing its comfort, she was radiant with happiness. "Are you ready to become our official parents?" Zeph asked with a grin that made Marcus's heart swell with pride. "We already are your parents," Marcus replied, ruffling the boy's hair. "This ceremony just gives us the paperwork to prove it." The wedding was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Traditional human vows blended with Villani hand-fasting rituals, while representatives from dozen worlds offered blessings in languages that sang like music. When Marcus and Nira exchanged their rings, simple, bands made from metal salvaged from his original crashed ship, there was not a dry eye in the floating garden. But the most moving moment came when the children stepped forward to recite vows of their own, not as witnesses, but as full members of the family being created. "We promise to love you both," Kira said, speaking for all 4 of them, "not because you saved us, but because you taught us what family really means. We promise to use our gifts to help others find the same love and acceptance you gave us." Finn added, "We promise to remember that being different makes us special. Not dangerous," Zeph continued. "And we promise to always come home for dinner," Luna finished, making everyone laugh through their tears. Dr. Varric, the elderly Catharian who had become their friend and the children's teacher, performed the final blessing. As he spoke, his crystal-studded skull glowed softly, adding his species' traditional wish for harmony and understanding by the bonds of choice. By the strength of love and by the power of hope, he intoned, "I pronounce you not just husband and wife, but a family united by something stronger than blood or species or worlds. You are united by the choice to love despite all obstacles." The celebration that followed lasted 3 days and became the stuff of legend. But for Marcus, the most perfect moment came later. He and Nira stood alone on their balcony, overlooking New Eden's diverse cityscape. "No regrets?" Nira asked, leaning against him as they watched the alien sunset paint the sky in impossible colors. "Only one," Marcus replied, tightening his arms around her. "I wish we had found each other sooner." "We found each other exactly when we were supposed to," she said, with the wisdom that had made him fall in love with her. "If we had met before, you would not have been the man who chose to save for frightened children, and I would not have been the woman who was willing to give up everything for them." A year later, their first biological child was born, a daughter with Marcus's stubborn chin and Nira's luminous eyes. They named her Hope, and she grew up speaking 3 languages and considering psychic children completely normal. The children's story spread across the galaxy, carried by the former bounty hunters who had become their protectors and advocates. Slowly, attitudes began to change. Other psychic children were no longer hunted but sought out for protection and proper training. The Galactic Council was forced to enact new laws protecting refugees and regulating the bounty hunter trade laws. The former hunter leader served 5 years in rehabilitation before being released. The first thing he did was travel to New Eden to apologize to the children in person. They forgave him without hesitation, and he ended up staying to work in the colony's security force. "Redemption," he told Marcus one day as they watched the children teach a group of new refugees how to use their abilities safely, "is the most valuable thing in the universe. And those kids give it away for free." As the years passed, Marcus and Nira's family continued to grow. Some of their children were human, some were Villani, and some were adopted from species they had never heard of. But all of them learned the same lesson that had started it all. Love is a choice, and choosing love changes everything. On quiet evenings, when the house was full of laughter and the sound of children playing, Marcus would sometimes think back to that moment in the Crystal Cave when he had first decided to help for frightened refugees. It had seemed like such a small choice at the time, driven by simple human decency. But small choices, he had learned, could reshape entire galaxies. All it took was one person willing to say, "I will not walk away." One person willing to choose love over fear. Hope over despair, family over blood, and sometimes, if you were very lucky, that choice would echo across the stars and come back to you multiplied beyond imagination. The hunter had wanted their heads for millions of credits. But Marcus had chosen something infinitely more valuable. He had chosen love. The story continued, as all the best stories do. With the next generation, and the choice they would make when their moment came to decide between fear and hope,